Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where today I want to talk about something that Millie Gibson has recently said to the newspaper. She was recently interviewed where she addressed directly the previous tabloid claims from, I think it was last year, that she was fired from Doctor Who for being a diva. Do you remember that? We covered it at the time. And now she's finally been able to basically respond now that the show is, basically done and her time on it is basically done. And yeah, what she has to say is incredibly interesting, so I thought I'd read that out. Funny enough, I actually saw Millie Gibson this weekend at Comic-Con as well, and she was very lovely. There was a good panel as well with her in it, and yeah, she was very, very nice. There's not much else I could say about that other than, yeah, she was nice. But we're going to get right into this. Subscribe if you're new, and I'm just going to get right into it. Millie Gibson speaks up about horrific tabloid rumours. Actress Millie Gibson addressed the tough position she was in when there were unflattering tabloid reports about her role in Doctor Who. Gibson explained that due to secrecy regarding series plotlines, she couldn't address a tabloid report that she had been acting like a diva on the Doctor Who set, and later reports that she had been dropped from the show. I couldn't be like, it's a lie, because they'd be like, well, that's spoilers, Gibson told iPaper. It was quite hard to stand up for myself without ruining the show. I was like, oh, this is horrific, it just looks like it's true. In fact, not only was Gibson not dropped, but she was due to return as Ruby Sunday as the companion for a second series, and she knew this before the negative reports came out. The scrutiny for the actress, who had just turned 19, was very painful. Oh, it was awful, she told the iPaper with pain in her voice. What was frustrating was the amount of people that were like, oh, sorry this has happened, mate. And I was like, yeah, it's not happened, but thank you. The pain was made easier to bear by her supportive co-star, Ncuti Gatwa, who faced his own negative attention when he was cast as the Doctor. He had some time with that, and it's just about being able to try and shut it out. The iPaper interview also revealed that due to blatant comparisons with actress Billie Piper, who played Rose Tyler, another young blonde Doctor Who companion from a working-class background, showrunner Russell T Davies insisted that Gibson chop her hair into a short bob so that she wouldn't look a bit too much like Billie. Interesting. Okay, so there's a couple of things to kind of go over there. Obviously, if you remember way back when, there was a report that Gibson had been dropped ahead of time for, on-set diva behaviour, and that essentially, Veralda was brought in, as a replacement. And it's interesting because it's completely understandable why people assumed that was the case. Even I myself thought for a while, I guess that kind of makes sense, right? But then you think about it some more and you're like, if she was that difficult to work with, why would she still have multiple episodes in the second series where she is still a huge focal point of them? Lucky Day is obviously an entirely Ruby-centric story, and even the Series 2 finale focuses a lot more on her, I would argue, than it does Veralda. So I think that if it was the case that she was fired for bad behaviour on set, why would you have her continue in such a big capacity, after that point? The more I think about it, the less sense it makes. Now, I will admit, I'm somewhat biased because I did actually, see Millie Gibson on set. We were on the same shoot day for the camp scene. And I have to say that she was nothing but, courteous and incredibly professional on that set. So, naturally, I do have a bit of a bias towards her at the moment because I have that experience. But I just didn't get the sense that, there was any real, hostility there. And obviously, when I was there, that was filming for Season 2. So, presumably, any of this supposed conflict would have happened ahead of time. So, I really don't know. It's a difficult one. But if this is the case, if what Millie Gibson is saying is true, that basically, none of it was ever true, and basically it had just been kind of, way blown out of proportion, then I do kind of think it should have been on the production team to say something in her defense. Obviously, she says here that she couldn't say much with regards to what was going on because of spoilers. However, at the same time, we knew she was filming for Season 2 after this report came out, and yet they didn't say anything, I don't think it would have been a spoiler to say that she was coming back when we all knew that. And I don't think it would have been much of a spoiler to say, look, this isn't true, she's here, she's still on the set, it's nonsense, whatever like that. I think that there is just a duty as like a, like a producer or, someone who works on one of these shows to defend your cast when stuff like this happens. It reminds me somewhat of John Bishop when he would like go on to chat shows and he would talk about how he got told off for telling a bunch of kids that his character was from Liverpool. Like, don't get me wrong, Doctor Who is a show that does have a lot of spoilers involved, and you want to try and keep that under wraps. And, I know better than anyone how much Doctor Who leaks. But at the same time, I don't think that should be the priority over, the actors, if that makes any sense. Like, at the end of the day, does it kill anyone if John Bishop said his character was from Liverpool? No. And equally, would it have really spoiled anything if they'd have given reassurances to people that, like, no, this isn't true, Millie is still here, she's still on the show, she's in the next season? I really don't think it would have, especially because we all knew that because of filming anyway. I don't know, it just kind of baffles me, really. And I mean, the other thing I found kind of interesting about this, well, there's two things, really, and obviously, and the other thing as well is, like, even her friends themselves thought that it was true, which kind of just goes to show, like, how much these kind of narratives spin out of control and stuff like that. It's nice to know that Ncuti Gatwa was there for her as well, at the very least. That is very nice to see. I can't imagine it would have been particularly easy for him either. Anyone taking on the role of the Doctor before they even start doing it always gets just an incredible amount of scrutiny, and that scrutiny goes double if you aren't basically the stereotypical Doctor archetype. If you are not basically a white guy, you're gonna get it more in the neck. That's just the way that it is. So it's nice to see that Ncuti Gatwa was supportive in that. And I think it is also worth saying that, like, at the time she was cast, I believe she was, like, 18, 19, as this article points out. So, like, yeah, of course you're gonna have moments at that age where, maybe, like, you are a bit tired or a bit frustrated. There are actors in their 40s and 50s who are known to be difficult to work with. Imagine being 18 or 19, and I'll point out, actually, one of the things that she said at the Q&A I was at was the first thing she filmed, which was 73 Yards. She didn't know that, like, she would be filming without Ncuti for the first couple of weeks. She said at the panel something to the effect of, Russell told her, oh, by the way, this is your first episode, by the way, Ncuti's not in it. And she was like, oh, alright. And then Ncuti texted her like, oh yeah, sorry babe, off to do sex education, stuff like that. So imagine the pressure of launching, like, a brand new period of Doctor Who at age 19 without the main cast member there. I think it's pretty understandable that there probably was some stress there, and I think that, yeah. And I sympathise as well, because, like, obviously, it was the only narrative that was out there at the time. I covered it at the time, because that was what we'd heard. That's what the news was at the time, so me, as, like, a kind of, like a news, Doctor Who news channel, did cover it, but I do wish they'd have been more proactive in saying, like, yeah, no, if that was the case, which I don't really have a reason to disbelieve her at this point. Like, she doesn't really have much of a reason to lie at this point. She's not on Doctor Who anymore. Other stars who have had bad times on Doctor Who haven't exactly, haven't exactly kept quiet about it. Like, obviously, Christopher Eccleston in particular is the one I'm thinking of who's been very outspoken. So I don't think that if anything was that bad that she wouldn't say it, But I do think that I think it's unfortunate that they didn't say anything really to protect her, especially at such like a young age. Like, this is what's so often forgotten with things like Doctor Who, is that, like, it is like a major franchise and there's so much scrutiny. And I do think there needs to be better, like, sort of protocol in place to help them with that. And I don't even just mean it with, like, this era, but I as I said, I felt the same with the last era and stuff like that. Some of the stuff that Jodie got, I don't know whether they were proactive enough in being like, yeah, no, that's not right. The other thing I found kind of interesting was Russell's deliberate choice for her to cut her hair shorter to avoid Rose Tyler comparisons, which is, funnily enough, something I remember happening at the time. I remember before season 1 came out, people saying that Ruby would end up just being like Rose Tyler 2.0 because she was blonde and had a name that began with an R. Like, that, and obviously, whatever your feelings are on, the Ruby Sunday character, I know that, like, she's probably not my favourite companion of all time. I don't really think you could say that she's a Rose clone. I think they're quite different characters. I think you can argue as to which one is better, but I don't think they're the same. I think they both have quite different kind of personalities and kind of backstories and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is interesting that Russell was conscious of the comparison there and suggested basically a shorter hairstyle as a result. Interesting stuff. I mean, the other thing is, if Millie Gibson was that bad to work with in a professional capacity, I mean, she's doing another show that's on Channel 5, I believe, now. Like, do you know what I mean? People who are difficult don't get rehired onto things, you know? At least the young ones. If you're old and you've had, like, decades of experience, you can get away with a bit more. That's just the truth of it. You know, there are actors who are known to be, you know, kind of difficult to work with, but because they have such a star power around them, that they kind of get away with it, you know, whereas I don't think that's probably the case for Millie Gibson, you know. Millie Gibson is, you know, obviously she was a Doctor Who companion, which in the UK is a big deal, but she's not like, you know, I don't know, like a Joaquin Phoenix, you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference in levels there. But yeah, interesting stuff. It was nice to see her defend herself. As I say, you know, she was nothing but, like, polite and, you know, friendly while I was there. And when I was there, I'll point out as well, it was towards the end of, you know, like a filming block and stuff, and like, you know, she was still nothing but nice. Everyone was. So yeah, I think nice for her to be able to finally come out and say her truth about this, and I just hope that maybe going forwards, whenever the show comes back, there is more in place to kind of defend, like, the talent, you know what I mean? Because I can't imagine how difficult that must be. Like, you know, I'm just a guy who talks about Doctor Who into a microphone in his office, and, you know, I get a lot of stuff online, so I can't imagine what it's like for an actual person who's actually on the show. Do you know what I mean? It's just a whole different world. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up because I'm rambling, but thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.